She was just a quiet black designer, adjusting the final stitches on a wedding gown that took her months to perfect. But when the bride saw it, she burst into laughter, mocking her in front of everyone, calling it cheap and ghetto. What the bride didn't know was that the same designer had once worked for a billionaire fashion house, and one phone call could change everything. Days later, the world would see that ugly dress on the cover of Vogue, and jaws would drop when they learned who designed it. Before we find out what happens next, tell us, have you ever seen someone mocked for something that later became iconic? Drop your story in the comments, and if you're already hooked, hit that like button to support stories that expose arrogance and uplift hidden talent. The air in the bridal studio was thick with the scent of lilies and entitlement. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the polished white floors gleam with an almost blinding intensity. This was a space designed for dreams, for perfect moments captured in silk and lace. But today, the dream was cracking. Amara Lewis stood perfectly still, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She felt like a statue in the center of a storm, the eye of a hurricane of scorn. Before her, the wedding gown she had poured her soul into hung on a mannequin, a vision of understated elegance. It wasn't covered in 1,000 crystals or layers of tulle. It was simple, architectural, a masterpiece of fabric and form. It was everything she believed in. And Lauren Prescott, the bride-to-be, was laughing. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a loud, derisive laugh that echoed off the pristine walls, a sound that felt like shattering glass. Her friends, a trio of women who looked like they were cast from the same mold of casual cruelty, joined in, their snickers sharp and piercing. One of them held up her phone, the red dot of the recording button a tiny malevolent eye. Lauren stepped forward and grabbed the delicate sleeve of the gown between her thumb and forefinger, as if touching something contaminated. "You call this couture?" she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. Her eyes, cold and blue, raked over Amara from head to toe, lingering for a moment on her simple work clothes. The unspoken message was clear. You don't belong here. Amara's face remained a mask of professional calm, but inside, a knot of hurt tightened in her stomach. She had spent 200 hours on this dress. She had hand-stitched the seams, draped the fabric herself, and sketched the design until her fingers were numb. She had imagined the bride's gasp of joy, the tears of happiness. She had not imagined this. Lauren tugged at the fabric, her painted nails a stark red against the soft ivory. "It's so plain. The color is boring. It looks like something you'd find in a discount bin." She turned to her friends, her lip curled in a theatrical pout. "She told me she understood luxury. Clearly she doesn't." Ethan, her fiancé, stood a few feet away, his face a portrait of mortification. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his eyes darting from Lauren to Amara and back again. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. He was a man trapped, caught between the woman he was about to marry and the basic human decency he knew was being violated. His silence was a betrayal, another small cut in Amara's composure. Amara's gaze flickered to him just for a second. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the shame. But it wasn't enough. He did nothing, he said nothing. He just stood there, a handsome statue of inaction. The bride wasn't finished. She felt the eyes of her friends on her, a captive audience egging her on. "I wanted something that says class. This says desperate." She waved a dismissive hand at Amara. "Get someone in here who knows what they're doing. Someone who understands what a Prescott wedding is supposed to look like." The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just about the dress anymore, it was about Amara, her talent, her race, her perceived station in life. Lauren's words were designed to diminish her, to put her in her place. Across the room, hidden behind a rack of shimmering bridesmaid dresses, Amara's assistant, Chloe, watched with wide, horrified eyes. Her hands were trembling with anger. She had seen Amara work on this gown, had witnessed the love and dedication poured into every stitch. This was an injustice she couldn't let go unrecorded. With a steadying breath, Chloe quietly lifted her own phone. She angled it through a gap in the dresses, making sure the lens captured the whole scene. Lauren's sneering face, her friends' mocking laughter, Ethan's frozen discomfort, and Amara's incredible, heartbreaking poise. She pressed the record button. The small red light blinked, a silent witness to the cruelty unfolding in the sunlit room. Amara finally spoke, her voice low but steady. There was no anger in it, only a quiet finality. "I understand," she said, her eyes meeting Lauren's. "The dress is not for you." She turned to the mannequin, her movements graceful and deliberate. She began to carefully unpin the gown, her hands moving with a practiced gentleness that was in stark contrast to the ugliness of the room. She was saving her creation from a world that didn't deserve it. Lauren watched her, a smug smile playing on her lips. She had won. She had put the little designer in her place. She turned to her friends and whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Time to find a real designer." The laughter started again as Amara folded the last piece of the dress, her heart aching, but her spirit somehow unbroken. Amara didn't say another word. She simply packed the gown into its protective garment bag, her movements precise and detached. It was as if she was building a wall around herself, brick by brick, shielding her emotions from the toxic atmosphere of the studio. She walked out of the gleaming showroom without a backward glance, leaving the scent of lilies and scorn behind her. The click of the door closing behind her was the only sound that punctuated the bride's renewed chatter. Once outside, the bright city air felt like a shock to her system. The sounds of traffic, the chatter of people passing by, it was all a blur. She walked the few blocks to her small workspace, the heavy garment bag feeling like a lead weight in her hand. Her studio was the opposite of the bridal shop. It was a small, cluttered space filled with life and creativity. Sketches were pinned to every wall, fabrics of every color and texture were draped over chairs, and mannequins stood like silent companions in the corners. This was her sanctuary, the one place she could be herself. She carefully hung the rejected gown on its dedicated form. In the soft light of her studio, the dress seemed to breathe. The fabric, a rare silk blend she had sourced herself, seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. It was a work of art. Her art. She ran a hand over the smooth material, the memory of Lauren's mocking tug, a fresh wound. And then, for the first time that day, she let her composure crack. A single tear escaped from the corner of her eye and traced a slow, hot path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of defeat. It was a tear of anger, of frustration, of a deep and profound hurt. But as she wiped it away with the back of her hand, something shifted inside her. The pain didn't dissolve. It crystallized. It hardened into a sharp, clear point of determination. She would not let this break her. She would not let Lauren Prescott's ignorance define the value of her work. Her mind drifted back, a defense mechanism kicking in, taking her away from this present pain to an older one. She remembered the sleek, intimidating offices of Avery Couture, one of the largest luxury brands in the world. She had been their rising star, the young prodigy whose designs were celebrated for their innovation and daring. She remembered the thrill of seeing her creations on runways in Paris and Milan. But she also remembered the whispers in the hallways, the way her ideas were sometimes presented by senior designers as their own, the subtle but persistent feeling that she was an outsider, a token. The final straw came during a boardroom meeting. She had proposed a new line inspired by her own heritage, a collection that blended traditional African textiles with modern silhouettes. The head designer, a man who had built his career on Eurocentric ideals of beauty, had smiled condescendingly. "It's a bit ethnic, don't you think?" he'd said. "Our brand is about universal luxury, not niche markets." In that moment, Amara saw the truth. They didn't want her vision. They wanted a sanitized version of her talent that they could control and market, so she had walked away. She left the high salary, the prestige, and the suffocating environment behind. She started her own small independent label, designing under a pseudonym, A. Lewis. It was a way to protect herself, to let her work speak for itself without the baggage of prejudice. She wanted to be judged on her skill, not on her skin color or her background. It was a harder path, but it was hers. A quiet chime from her laptop pulled her back to the present. She sat down at her desk, her eyes scanning her emails. Most were bills or inquiries from fabric suppliers. But one stood out. The sender was Victoria Harland, a senior editor at Vogue. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She had sent a portfolio to the magazine months ago, a long shot she never expected to hear back from. She opened the email. Victoria's words were direct and enthusiastic. She was curating a special feature on emerging designers for a piece that would eventually feed into their prestigious Look of the Year competition. She was impressed by the portfolio of A. Lewis and requested to see a sample of her work. A slow smile spread across Amara's face. It was a small, quiet smile, but it was filled with a defiant light. She looked at the gown standing silently in the corner, the dress that had been called cheap and plain, the dress that had been mocked and dismissed. An idea began to form in her mind, a daring, audacious plan. Lauren Prescott thought she understood luxury. She was about to get a lesson in what true artistry looked like. Amara typed her reply to Victoria Harland. "I have the perfect piece," she wrote. "It's on its way." She would submit the dress. The very same dress. Let the world decide its worth. Chloe couldn't shake the image from her mind. Back in her small apartment, the silence was almost as loud as the bride's laughter had been in the studio. She replayed the video on her phone, her thumb hovering over the delete button. The clip was brutal. It showed Lauren in all her arrogant glory, her voice sharp and cruel, her friends' snickers like a venomous chorus. And it showed Amara, standing tall and dignified, absorbing the humiliation with a grace that made Chloe's heart ache. Part of her wanted to post it immediately, blast it across every social media platform. Let the world see Lauren Prescott for who she really was. The injustice of it all burned in her chest. Amara was the most talented designer she had ever met. She was kind, she was brilliant, and she did not deserve to be treated like that. But fear held her back. Lauren's family was powerful. They had money and connections. A backlash could ruin her career before it had even started. She could be blacklisted, labeled a troublemaker. Was it her fight to begin? Torn by her dilemma, she did the only thing that felt right. She opened her messenger app and found Amara's name. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed. "Amara, I am so sorry about what happened today. It was horrible, and you handled it with so much class." She paused, taking a deep breath. I recorded it. I have a video of the whole thing. I don't know what to do with it, but I wanted you to have it, just in case you ever need proof of how she treated you." She attached the video file and hit send. The message felt like a small weight lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't a solution, but it was an act of solidarity. She waited, her stomach churning with anxiety. What if Amara was angry? What if she thought Chloe had overstepped? A few minutes later, 3 dots appeared on the screen, indicating Amara was typing. The reply was simple, but it spoke volumes about Amara's character. "Thank you, Chloe. It means a lot that you did that, but please hold on to it for now. Don't do anything with it." Chloe was surprised. She had expected anger, a desire for revenge. Instead, she got calm, measured control. She typed back, "Are you sure? She deserves to be exposed." Amara's response was immediate. "I know, but I want this to be about my work, not about her behavior. The right moment will come. For now, silence is the best strategy." Chloe stared at the screen, a newfound wave of admiration washing over her. Amara wasn't just a great designer. She was a brilliant strategist. She wasn't acting out of emotion. She was playing a longer game. In that moment, Chloe's loyalty was sealed. She would do whatever Amara asked. She would wait. She typed one final message. I understand. I'm with you, whatever you decide. Just say the word. The reply was a single heart emoji. It was enough. Chloe deleted the video from her phone's main gallery, saving a copy to a secure, hidden folder. She would keep her promise. She would be Amara's silent ally, waiting in the wings for the right time to pull back the curtain. Lauren Prescott felt victorious. She was the star of her own fabulous story, and she had just written a satisfying chapter. 2 days after the confrontation at the bridal studio, she hosted a lavish brunch for her bridesmaids at a trendy rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Mimosas flowed, and the conversation was light and bubbly, centered entirely around her. She held her phone up, regaling her friends with the tale of the disaster dress. You should have seen it, she said, her voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. It was the saddest, most pathetic thing I've ever seen. That poor little designer had no idea what she was doing. Her friends laughed on cue, their faces a mixture of sycophantic agreement and genuine amusement. They loved Lauren's drama. It was their entertainment. To add a visual aid to her story, Lauren had edited a short clip from the video her friend had taken. It focused only on her own reaction, her initial shocked laughter, her disdainful touch of the fabric. She had carefully cut out the parts showing Amara's calm face. She didn't want the designer to look sympathetic. She wanted to look like a discerning client with impeccable taste. She posted the clip to her social media with a caption, "When you try to support a small business, but it's a total disaster. #bridezilla, #wedding fail, #couture, gone wrong." The post began to gain traction almost immediately. Her followers, mostly people within her wealthy social circle, loved it. Comments like, "OMG, you're hilarious," and "Good for you for not settling," flooded her notifications. She felt a rush of validation. See? Everyone agreed with her. But as the post spread beyond her immediate circle, a different kind of comment began to appear. "This feels kind of mean," one user wrote. "Why humiliate someone trying to make a living?" another added. A few even called her out directly. "You're not just a bridezilla, you're a bully." Lauren scoffed, dismissing the negative comments as jealousy. "They're just bitter," she told her friends, waving her phone dismissively. "They can't afford a real couture gown, so they don't get it." Ethan arrived late to the brunch, looking tired and stressed. He sat down beside Lauren and gave her a strained smile. He had seen the social media post, and the knot of discomfort in his stomach had tightened into a solid ball of dread. He waited until her friends were distracted by the arrival of more food, before leaning in to speak to her quietly. "Lauren, maybe you should take that video down," he said, his voice low. Lauren rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ethan. It's funny." "It's not funny," he insisted, his voice firmer than usual. "You didn't have to humiliate her like that. You could have just said the dress wasn't for you and left. Putting it online is just cruel." Lauren's smile vanished, replaced by a cold glare. Cruel? She was trying to pass off that rag as a designer gown. She was wasting my time. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, laced with an ugly sort of superiority. "Honestly, Ethan, people like her should know their place. She was out of her league, and someone had to tell her." Ethan recoiled slightly. "People like her?" he repeated, a look of genuine disappointment on his face. He saw it then, a hardness in Lauren he had always chosen to ignore. He saw the casual cruelty, the lack of empathy. For a fleeting moment he wondered if he was making a mistake. But the moment passed. The wedding was weeks away. Invitations were sent. Deposits were paid. It was too late to back out now. He fell silent again, retreating into the familiar comfort of conflict avoidance. He watched Lauren laugh and show her phone to her friends, bragging about the number of likes she was getting. And he felt a deep, unsettling shame, not just for her actions, but for his own silence. The days that followed were a quiet hum of activity for Amara. She packed the dress with meticulous care, wrapping it in layers of tissue paper, as if it were a fragile treasure, and sent it via a trusted courier to the Vogue offices in New York. Then she tried to put it out of her mind. She threw herself into other projects, sketching new designs, experimenting with different fabrics. Work was her refuge. But in the quiet moments late at night when the city outside her window fell silent, the doubt would creep in. Had she made a mistake? Was Lauren right? Was the dress a failure? Was she just a poor little designer who was out of her league? The humiliation of that day had left a scar, a tender spot that ached when she was alone with her thoughts. She was sitting at her drafting table one night, the lamp casting a warm circle of light on a blank page. She couldn't seem to make her hands work. The creative spark felt distant, smothered by self-doubt. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her, the screen lighting up with an unknown number from a New York area code. Her heart gave a sudden, sharp thump against her ribs. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. It could be anyone. A telemarketer, a wrong number. But a sliver of hope, stubborn and defiant, made her answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice a little breathless. The voice on the other end was warm, professional, and crackling with energy. "Hello? Am I speaking with A. Lewis?" It was a woman. Amara's mind raced. "This is she," she replied, forcing her voice to sound calm and steady. "This is Victoria Harland from Vogue," the woman said, and Amara felt her world tilt on its axis. "I'm calling about the gown you sent us." Amara held her breath. This was it, the moment of judgment. She braced herself for a polite rejection, a thank you, but it's not what we're looking for. "We received it this morning," Victoria continued, and Amara could hear a smile in her voice. "And I have to tell you, the entire office is buzzing. We opened the box, and there was just this collective gasp." Amara sank back into her chair, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her desk. "Oh," was all she could manage to say. "Oh," is an understatement, Victoria laughed. "It's stunning. Absolutely breathtaking. The cut, the fabric, the way it moves. It's pure innovation. It's modern and timeless all at once. It's everything we look for." The words washed over Amara like a healing balm, soothing the raw wound of Lauren's insults. Stunning. Breathtaking. Pure innovation. Victoria wasn't finished. "We feature dozens of designers, and frankly, a lot of the work starts to look the same. But this is a statement. It's a point of view. Who are you, A. Lewis? We have to know." A quiet, genuine smile touched Amara's lips for the first time in days. She felt a sense of vindication so sweet it almost made her dizzy. The irony was almost too perfect. The same dress, the dress that was called cheap, ghetto, a disaster. That very same piece of art was now being praised by one of the most powerful editors in the fashion world. "I'm just a designer who believes in my work," Amara said softly, the strength returning to her voice. "Well, your work is about to be on a very big stage," Victoria said, her tone serious now. "We're featuring it prominently. It's a top contender for our Look of the Year cover. Congratulations, you've earned it." They talked for a few more minutes about logistics and next steps, but Amara barely heard them. Her mind was replaying Lauren's sneering face, her mocking laughter. She thought about Ethan's silence and her friend's cruelty. They thought they had broken her. They had no idea they had just lit the fuse. The world was about to see her work, and soon, very soon, they would all know her name. A few days later, Lauren Prescott was on a mission. Her social media post had caused a small but irritating ripple of negativity, and she was determined to quell it with a new, spectacular wedding gown. She swept into one of the city's most exclusive bridal boutiques, a place where champagne was served on arrival, and the price tags were whispered, not displayed. She was trying on a gown covered in thousands of hand-sewn pearls, a dress that screamed money, when her phone buzzed with a notification. While the sales assistant fussed over the train, Lauren glanced at her screen. It was a post from a popular fashion blog she followed. The headline was intriguing. Vogue teases its look of the year, and it's set to change fashion. She clicked the link. The article was gushing. It spoke of a groundbreaking new design, a piece that was redefining modern bridal wear with its bold simplicity and architectural grace. It was, the blog claimed, the most anticipated reveal in the fashion world this year. Lauren scrolled through the text, a smug sense of superiority filling her. This was the kind of world she understood. This was real luxury. Then she saw the image. Vogue had released a single artfully cropped teaser photo. It showed the sleeve and shoulder of a gown, draped over the arm of a mannequin. There were no pearls, no lace, no extravagant beading, just a clean, perfect line of ivory fabric. The fabric. Lauren froze. The champagne flute halfway to her lips. Her stomach did a slow, sickening lurch. It looked familiar. The way the fabric folded, the specific shade of ivory, the minimalist perfection of the single seam. It looked exactly like the dress she had laughed at. Her heart started to beat a little faster. No, it couldn't be. It was a coincidence. There were thousands of dresses in the world. This was Vogue. They wouldn't feature a nobody designer. She tried to push the thought away, to dismiss it as a ridiculous, paranoid fantasy. "Is everything all right, Ms. Prescott?" the sales assistant asked, noticing the color drain from her face. "Yes, fine," Lauren snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. I don't like this one. It's too much." She stepped out of the pearl-encrusted gown and grabbed her phone again, her fingers flying across the screen as she zoomed in on the teaser image. The blog post mentioned one more detail. The gown comes from a mysterious, previously unknown black artist, designing under a pseudonym. A source at Vogue tells us her work is about to make her a household name. A cold dread, sharp and icy, began to creep up Lauren's spine. An unknown black artist. The words echoed in her mind, mingling with the memory of Amara's quiet, dignified face. She remembered her own cruel words. People like her should know their place. The unease was no longer a quiet creep. It was a loud, frantic alarm bell ringing in her head. She quickly closed the article, her hands feeling suddenly clumsy. She had to be wrong. It was impossible. But as she stood there in the opulent boutique, surrounded by dresses that cost more than most cars, she couldn't shake the terrifying feeling that she had made a very, very big mistake. Halfway across the country, in a glass-walled corner office overlooking the city skyline, Richard Avery was not a man who missed things. As the billionaire CEO of the Avery Fashion Group, one of the largest and most powerful conglomerates in the industry, his job was to see the future of fashion before it happened. He was scrolling through an industry report on his tablet when a link to the Vogue teaser caught his eye. He clicked on it, his expression impassive. He had seen thousands of dresses, hundreds of next big things. It took a lot to impress him. He looked at the cropped image of the gown, and he stopped. His carefully maintained composure flickered. He leaned closer to the screen, his sharp eyes narrowing in on the details. He saw more than just a beautiful sleeve. He saw a technique, a signature. He saw the specific way the fabric was folded at the shoulder, a complex, almost impossible piece of drapery that looked effortless. It was a technique he had seen only one other person master. He zoomed in further, studying the precise, invisible stitching along the seam. It was flawless. It was a fingerprint. Amara Lewis. The name surfaced in his memory instantly, attached to a pang of regret. She had been the most promising young designer to ever walk through the doors of Avery Couture, his flagship brand. She had a vision that was raw and brilliant, a talent that could have redefined the company. He remembered the day she resigned. He had been away on business, and by the time he returned, she was gone. He had read the report from his head designer, a vague explanation about creative differences. He had always suspected there was more to the story. He knew the old guard at his company was resistant to change, steeped in a tradition that often bordered on discriminatory. He had tried to find her afterward, to bring her back, but she had vanished from the mainstream fashion world, leaving no trace. He had considered it one of his greatest professional failures. And now, here it was, her work, unmistakable. He read the article, his interest piqued by the mention of an unknown designer, A. Lewis. Of course, a pseudonym. She was protecting herself, starting over on her own terms. A slow, calculating smile spread across Richard Avery's face. This was more than just a beautiful dress. It was an opportunity, a chance to correct a past mistake and to secure a future for his company that was bold and forward-thinking. He buzzed his executive assistant. "Get me everything you can find on a designer named A. Lewis," he said, his voice calm but with an undeniable edge of command. "Find out who represents her, where she's based, everything, and schedule a meeting with the editorial team at Vogue. I want to know more about this look of the year." He leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on the image of the gown. He had let her slip through his fingers once. He would not make that mistake again. Amara Lewis was coming back to the world of high fashion. And Richard Avery was going to make sure it was on her terms, with his company's full power behind her. The day Vogue released the cover, the internet broke. There was no teaser this time, no cropped photo. It was the full, breathtaking image. A world-famous supermodel stood against a simple gray backdrop, wearing Amara's dress. The gown flowed around her like liquid moonlight, its simple lines creating a silhouette that was both powerful and ethereally beautiful. It was a masterpiece. The headline was emblazoned in bold, iconic letters, "The Look of the Year," and beneath it, a smaller, even more powerful line, "Designed by Amara Lewis." They had used her real name. The post went viral in minutes. It was shared by celebrities, influencers, and fashion lovers around the world. The comments section exploded with a torrent of praise. Genius. A new era of fashion. Finally, something original. The story of the mysterious A. Lewis, now revealed as Amara Lewis, was the feel-good narrative everyone was craving. A hidden talent finally getting her due. But for one person, the reveal was not a feel-good moment. Lauren Prescott was in her final dress fitting for her new ridiculously expensive gown when her phone began to buzz incessantly. It was a flood of notifications, dozens of tags from her friends. Annoyed, she opened her social media app. And she saw it. The Vogue cover. The dress. Amara's name. A guttural sound. Something between a gasp and a choke escaped her lips. Her jaw dropped. The color drained from her face so fast that the seamstress asked if she was going to faint. It was real. The nightmare she had been trying to dismiss was real, and it was on the cover of the most famous fashion magazine in the world. Her friends were tagging her, not to share in a beautiful fashion moment, but to point and laugh. The comments on her own page were a brutal mix of shock and mockery. "Is this the disaster dress? LOL. You have the worst taste in history. This aged well." Her own viral video, the one she had posted to humiliate Amara, was now being used against her. People had found it and were resharing it alongside the Vogue cover. The contrast was damning. One post showed her laughing, calling the dress cheap. The other showed the world hailing it as a work of genius. She was no longer a discerning bride. She was a clown, a bully, whose ignorance was now on public display. Her phone buzzed again. It was a private message from Ethan. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The message was short, but every word was a dagger. "I am so sorry, Amara," it began, and she realized with a jolt of horror that he hadn't messaged her. He had sent it directly to Amara Lewis and screenshotted it for her to see. The rest of the message to Amara continued. "I should have spoken up. What Lauren did was wrong, and I was a coward for not saying anything. Your dress is beautiful, and you deserve all of this success." Underneath the screenshot, he had written a single line to Lauren. "We need to talk." The world was crashing down around her. Her friends were mocking her, strangers were calling her heartless, and now her own fiancé was apologizing to the woman she had tormented. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, wearing a gown that cost a fortune, but now felt like a costume. The woman staring back at her looked small, foolish, and utterly defeated. The laughter had stopped. Richard Avery moved quickly. The Vogue cover was the opening he needed. He had his team work around the clock, and within 48 hours they had found Amara. They had also prepared an offer, one he knew she couldn't refuse. He didn't send a subordinate or an HR representative. He requested the meeting himself. Amara walked into the Avery Fashion Group headquarters feeling a strange mix of trepidation and empowerment. The last time she had been in this building, she had been a junior designer, full of hope that was slowly being eroded. Now, she was here on her own terms, invited by the CEO himself. Richard Avery's office was intimidating, but the man himself was surprisingly disarming. He didn't sit behind his massive desk. He met her at the door, shook her hand warmly, and led her to a small seating area with comfortable chairs. "Amara," he began, his voice sincere, "I want to start by apologizing. I know why you left this company years ago. I didn't see the toxic culture my senior staff was fostering, and for that failure of leadership, I am truly sorry." Amara was taken aback. This was not the corporate stonewalling she had expected. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I appreciate that." "Your talent was a great loss to us," he continued, leaning forward. "When I saw that Vogue cover, I knew. I knew it was you. And I knew I had to correct my mistake." He then laid out his offer. It was more than a job, it was a kingdom. He was offering her the role of creative director for Avery Couture, the company's most prestigious and powerful brand. She would have full creative control, an almost unlimited budget, and the power to reshape the future of the house. It was the kind of offer designers dreamed of their entire careers. Amara listened, her expression unreadable. She felt the pull of the opportunity, the chance to have a global platform for her vision. But she remembered the reason she had left. The whispers, the dismissal of her ideas, the feeling of being an outsider. "The money and the title are impressive, Mr. Avery," she said when he had finished. "But the culture of a company is more important. I will not work in an environment where people are judged by anything other than their talent." She looked him directly in the eye, her resolve like steel. "If I accept this position, it comes with a condition." "Name it," he said without hesitation. "I want to create a new program within the company," she explained. "A mentorship initiative, funded by Avery Couture, to find and develop designers from diverse and underprivileged backgrounds. We showcase talent, not just those who were born into privilege and have the right connections. We open the doors that were closed to people like me." Richard Avery looked at her, and his respect deepened. She wasn't just negotiating a contract, she was demanding systemic change. She was using her newfound power to lift others up. He had offered her a job, and she had countered with a mission. He smiled. "I agree," he said. "Consider it done. Welcome back to Avery Couture, Ms. Lewis." Meanwhile, completely unaware of the tectonic shifts happening in the fashion world, Lauren Prescott received an invitation. It was for a major press event hosted by the Avery Fashion Group, announcing a bold new direction for their flagship brand. Her father, a minor investor in the conglomerate, insisted she attend with him. "You need to show your face," he had told her, his voice tight with disappointment over her recent social media scandal. "We need to do damage control." Lauren agreed. She saw it as a chance to rehabilitate her image, to be seen at a high-profile event, looking glamorous and unbothered. She had no idea who she was about to face. She had no idea that the woman she had tried to crush was now standing at the very center of the world she so desperately wanted to be a part of. The event was a glittering affair. A sea of fashion journalists, industry insiders, and wealthy investors, all gathered in a grand ballroom under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. Lauren Prescott made her entrance on her father's arm, wearing her most expensive dress and a practiced, confident smile. She worked the room, laughing a little too loudly, greeting people she barely knew, desperate to project an aura of someone who belonged. She felt the whispers and saw the sideways glances. Her humiliation was the hottest gossip in town, but she pretended not to notice. She was a Prescott. She would not be cowed. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. Richard Avery, looking every bit the billionaire titan, walked onto the stage. He spoke of the future, of innovation, of the need for fashion to be more than just clothes, but a reflection of the world we live in. Lauren stood near the front, a glass of champagne in her hand, feeling a sense of smug satisfaction. Her family had ties to this empire. This was her world. "To lead us into this new era," Richard announced, his voice booming through the speakers, "we needed a visionary, a leader with a unique voice and an unshakable integrity. It is my profound honor to announce the new creative director of Avery Couture." Cameras flashed, and a wave of anticipation rippled through the room. Lauren leaned forward, curious to see which established famous designer had been poached for the coveted role. Richard Avery smiled. "Please welcome Ms. Amara Lewis." The name hung in the air for a split second before the impact landed. And then Amara walked onto the stage. She wasn't wearing a sequined ball gown. She wore one of her own designs, a simple, elegant black dress that commanded more attention than all the glitter in the room combined. She looked powerful. She looked serene. She looked completely in charge. The entire room fell silent. It was a sudden, profound silence, the kind that happens after a massive shock. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. Every eye in the ballroom swiveled from Amara on the stage to Lauren standing in the crowd. Lauren's face, which had been arranged in a mask of pleasant interest, completely crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a sickly, pale white. Her carefully constructed smile froze and then collapsed. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent O of disbelief. The champagne flute slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the dead silence. No one moved. The whispers started slowly, then grew into a tidal wave of murmurs. "Is that... It's her. The designer," she mocked. "Oh my God." Lauren was trapped in a nightmare. The woman she had called a poor little designer, the woman she had tried to ruin for sport, was now the creative head of one of the most powerful fashion houses in the world. She was the boss. Amara stepped up to the microphone, her calm gaze sweeping over the audience. She didn't look at Lauren. She didn't need to. She held the attention of the entire room in the palm of her hand. "Thank you, Richard," she said, her voice clear and steady, amplified for all to hear. "It's an honor to be here." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I've learned that true creativity often flourishes not in praise, but in adversity." Her eyes scanned the sea of faces. "So tonight, I want to thank every voice that ever tried to silence creativity. Every person who ever looked at something new and met it with scorn instead of curiosity. You taught me the value of staying true to your vision. You taught me that your work must speak for itself. Her words were a masterclass in grace and power. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew exactly who she was talking about. Lauren stood frozen, the shattered glass at her feet a perfect metaphor for her life. The world was watching her humiliation, and this time, it wasn't on a small phone screen. It was in real time, under the glare of 1,000 flashing cameras. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Lauren's father, a man who valued his reputation and business connections above all else, was mortified. He stood beside his daughter, his face a thunderous mask of rage and shame. He could feel the eyes of his peers on him, their whispers like tiny, sharp knives. His daughter's petty cruelty had not just made her a social pariah. It had made their family a liability. Before Amara had even finished her speech, Richard Avery was already executing the next phase of his plan. He walked over to Lauren's father, his expression grim. He didn't speak loudly, but his voice cut through the nearby chatter with icy precision. "Your daughter's behavior reflects a profound lack of judgment," he said, his voice low and final. "Her public actions have caused reputational damage by association. The Avery Fashion Group is severing all ties with your investment portfolio, effective immediately." It was a corporate execution, delivered with the swift, clean efficiency of a guillotine. Lauren's father's face went from red to ashen. The investment was significant, but the public dismissal was catastrophic. It was a declaration to the entire industry that the Prescott family was no longer welcome. Lauren heard it all. She stood there, mute and trembling, as her future was dismantled in a single quiet conversation. The world she had taken for granted, the power, the privilege, the automatic respect, was evaporating before her very eyes. She looked up at the stage, at Amara, who was now smiling and shaking hands with other executives. And for the first time, Lauren felt a feeling that was entirely new to her. Utter powerlessness. The cameras, which had been focused on the stage, now turned their lenses on her. They zoomed in on her pale, shocked face, her trembling lips, the shattered glass at her feet. They were capturing her downfall, preserving her humiliation for the world to see and dissect. She was no longer the one in control of the narrative. She was just the villain in Amara's success story. Standing just off to the side of the stage, out of the main spotlight, but close enough to see everything, was Chloe. Amara had called her the day she accepted the job. "I need a chief assistant," she had said, "someone I can trust, someone who was there from the beginning." Chloe had accepted without a moment's hesitation. Now she stood there dressed in a sharp, elegant pantsuit, her official Avery Couture ID badge clipped to her jacket. She watched as Lauren was essentially fired in front of everyone. She saw the shock, the shame, the crumbling of a lifetime of arrogance. She felt no pity. She only felt a profound sense of justice. She looked at Amara, who was now surrounded by a crowd of admirers, all hanging on her every word. She saw her mentor, her boss, handling her newfound power with the same quiet grace she had shown when she was being humiliated. Chloe felt a swell of pride so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. She had been a silent witness. Now she was part of the victory. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Amara's first collection for Avery Couture was a global phenomenon. It was hailed by critics as a triumph, a perfect blend of the brand's classic heritage and her own modern, visionary aesthetic. The clothes were not just beautiful, they were meaningful. The mentorship program she had established became the talk of the industry, a beacon of hope for young designers who had always been locked out of the exclusive world of high fashion. She was more than a designer. She was a movement. Vogue, the magazine that had started it all, published a follow-up feature 6 months later. It was an in-depth profile of Amara, not just as a designer, but as a leader. The title of the article was "Grace Over Arrogance: The Woman Who Redefined Modern Couture." The article retold the story of the rejected dress, but this time it was framed as a parable for the modern age. It was a story about resilience, integrity, and the quiet power of staying true to oneself in the face of ignorance. And what of Lauren Prescott? She vanished. Her social media accounts were deleted. She was no longer seen at the glamorous parties and events that had once been her entire world. The wedding to Ethan never happened. He had, as his message suggested, talked to her. And in that talk, he had finally found the courage to end a relationship that was built on a foundation of shallowness and cruelty. Lauren's name became a cautionary tale whispered in the high society circles she once dominated, a story about how quickly a reputation built on arrogance can turn to dust. The story closes not in a grand ballroom or a bustling design studio, but in the quiet of Amara's new, larger office. She stands by the window looking out at the city lights. On a mannequin in the corner stands the dress, the look of the year. She had it sent back from the Vogue archives. It serves as a constant reminder, not of the humiliation, but of the moment everything changed. It reminds her that greatness is often forged in the fires of rejection. It reminds her that the things others mock are sometimes the very things that make you special. The narrator's voice comes in, a final thought to seal the lesson. Never mock what you don't understand, because greatness often hides behind humility. Respect is not defined by status, it's revealed by character. Mock the humble today, and you might bow before them tomorrow. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.